This is my cheap second-hand bike, and this is Darley Moor Race Circuit, where I'll be racing today. But oh my God, what is up with the weather? It was beautiful sunshine on the whole of the ride out, but as soon as we got up here, it's a really thick, horrible fog. So yeah, I'm not really looking forward to riding around in this for an hour. I'm hoping I'm not going to get too cold. But yeah, it's going to be an interesting one from visibility perspective at least. But what bike am I going to be racing on today? Well, the bike we're racing on is my cheap second-hand Trek Domane I picked up a few months ago for just £700. And I threw a few cheap upgrades on it, spending less than £900 in total. And I think I've made a really awesome bike. But is it going to be any good in a crit? Let's find out. Well, how have I upgraded this bike exactly? Well, firstly, I've gone for tubeless tyres. Secondly, I've overhauled the front end with a longer stem and narrower, better fitting bars. I've done some little tweaks to things like the cassette and skewers to save a bit of weight. And finally, what you didn't see in my previous video, I've now swapped to a longer seat post and a different saddle so I can get a slightly more appropriate saddle height. It might be a little bit sketchy doing a crit on rim brakes these days when everyone else has got disc, but hopefully it's going to stay dry, so that won't be too much of a problem. But I better get warmed up and get ready to race. So that's it, the whistle was blown and we're off the start line. And actually, it was a rather chill start, with no one really trying anything in the first lap. There were a huge field racing with almost 50 riders, meaning speeds were going to be incredibly high. And I reckon a breakaway attempt was probably quite unlikely, given there was barely any wind either. And as we get to the back end of the first straight, we'll go around this really tight hairpin once every lap. And you can see here just how many positions I'm already losing just on that first lap from not being great at cornering. And yes, I know, my kryptonite in racing is my ability to go around corners quickly, especially really tight ones. However, my poor skills aside, I don't think it was purely just my bike handling holding me back here. I do think this Trek behind me definitely isn't the best handling bike for cornering. Now I think some of that is me trying to cobble the geometry into being a little bit more of an aggressive race position when it's really not built for that. But yeah, I was too high up and just too cramped and short on the bike. And after a rather uneventful first lap, we were straight onto the second lap, and at least here, finally some moves started to happen. But my strategy was to sit back and let them play out. I knew probably nothing was going that early, and so unless I saw something really dangerous start to get up the road, I was just chilling in the bunch, knowing that with this many riders and speeds so high, it's unlikely any major moves were going to go. If I was going to give a move a go, it was going to be later into the race when people are a little bit more tired and maybe not paying as much attention as in the first couple of laps. And as you can see here at the back end of the second lap, every lap there is this short, punchy climb, if you can call it that, where yes, the road goes uphill ever so slightly. And yeah, everyone seems to always launch huge watts up here, as yeah, it's the only bit of the course that's not just a smooth, flat road. And after a few failed attacks from various different riders, yeah, 3 or 4 laps in, we were still sitting pretty with no break and everyone still together in the bunch. And this is when I noticed a move going that started to look a little bit more promising. There was one guy off the front and a few more people starting to get ready to jump. So I thought, what the hell, let's give it a go myself, and tried to launch across to see what I could do, along with a couple of the riders. And this is where I'm going to throw in another slight criticism of this Trek for racing specifically. Given the geometry, I found it really hard to get tucked down into that nice sort of Aero hoods position. The bike fit was just way too short for me. And given the amount of watts I'm doing trying to close this gap, you can see just how horrifically not aero I am right now. A group of 4 of us had established by the time we got to the hairpin, and I was just about getting onto the wheel, but then, yeah, my poor cornering strikes again, and I start to drift off the wheel as we go through the hairpin. Really frustrating. I need to work on my cornering here because, yeah, every lap I was losing positioning or massively hemorrhaging speed on the corners. As I said before, it is really my kryptonite when racing. And because of that, I end up off the wheel and having to put in a huge effort to try and get back on. But unfortunately, before long, the main bunch were back on us, and yeah, we were caught. That wasn't going anywhere. And at this point, yeah, while I had to have a go, after about 4 or 5 laps, it was pretty clear that a move wasn't sticking today. If you're interested a little bit more in the bike I'm racing on, I'll leave a link below and in a card up on screen the videos where I buy and check out and upgrade the bike. So that'd be a great watch next after this one. But about 10k later, I had to have one final roll of the dice. I saw a really strong move being launched by actually a teammate of mine who I know is really good tactically. So I thought, right, this is going to be the one that goes, if any. I'm going to give this one last go. My legs were feeling pretty fresh. It was dead easy in the bunch. So I tried to jump on his wheel and follow, but yeah, my reaction times weren't quite quick enough. So I did have a bit of a gap to close. However, yeah, we did get there. But as we were rounding the hairpin, again, more story of me being bad at cornering. I do start to pedal ever so slightly too early. And yeah, I noticed a bit of a pedal strike, which really did throw my confidence a bit. And yeah, I think it's a product of two things. One, that my speed was obviously a little bit higher as I was trying to get in this move. So I was more lent into the corner than I had been on previous laps when I could pedal at this point. And also, I'm not really used to riding the 175mm cranks that this Trek has. I've been trying to transition over to 165s actually lately. So you've got actually quite a bit more clearance. And because of that pedal strike, I lost a load of momentum. I really backed off. Pretty scared actually when you have a pedal strike at over 40 kilometers an hour. Not a nice thing to happen. And I had a huge gap to close to get back to that group I was in. And with the help of a couple more guys jumping across, we did manage to form a break of about 7 or 8 riders. However, it was very short-lived, and as we rounded the corner onto the climb, that was it. The peloton were back on us again. However, as we rounded this corner, you'll notice, yeah, I have another pedal strike, and this really was like my, right, we're not playing around anymore with these breakaway attempts. I'm just gonna play it safe and sit in a bunch and wait to see what happens deeper in the race. So from this point onwards, it was a fairly uneventful race again. None of them moves stuck. Every time someone tried something, it'd get chased down pretty quickly. And to be honest with you, this was a race where you could have had pretty much a zone 2 ride sat on the back of the bunch and not had to do anything until the sprint. However, coming into the last couple of laps, the main field were getting a little bit twitchy and I could see things were getting a bit sketchy. And yeah, as we crossed with 2 laps to go, rounding that first corner onto the main straight, unfortunately a guy in front of me loses it, and I hope he's all right and not too banged up. But yeah, goes down right in front of me, and I think might have taken out some riders behind as well. Fortunately, I managed to avoid it and stuck with the main field, but that's just a reality of racing. You know, there are risks that people do take. However, despite surviving this one, you could tell everyone was so nervous and twitchy. As we went up the climb to take the bell, there was another moment that was really sketchy, forcing a few riders actually onto the grass, cyclocross style.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
It's a miracle no one went down there. There was a bit of a touch of wheels and riders weaving all over the place. But yeah, we got through it and we were on the bell lap. At this point, you could tell everyone was just saving themselves for that final punch into the sprint. And maybe at this point, I should have taken a few more risks and moved myself up a little bit more in the bunch. But I was still a bit sketched out by all them crashes. So I was playing it a bit too cautious, really. But yeah, as we roll round onto the final climb, obviously everyone is absolutely launching it. And yeah, I do what I can, getting the watts up, 700-800 watts up the climb. But yeah, this is a weird course. Everyone always launches way too early because of that hill at about 400 to 500 meters to go. That means once you're up it and you've done your big effort to try and like get as much momentum up the hill as you can, you still got 200 or 300 meters to hold onto the line. And I had nothing in my legs to sprint at this point. I was just spinning away in the saddle, trying to keep the watts, 500-600. But realistically, it was going to be a mid-pack finish for me. I was probably in about 20th place. Unfortunately, they don't publish the results that deep. They only publish the top 10 for this race, so I have no idea where I finished, but I reckon I was in the top half of that field.
Oh, well, that's race done. It was proper cold, actually. But yeah, it's weird. It was beautiful sun this morning, and then as soon as I got here, it was like thick fog. Started to burn off a bit now, typical, now the race is over. But yeah, given that a bit of a crash with 2 to go, I was like, it's not worth breaking my collarbone over this one. So yeah, I took it pretty easy in, but you know, it's a good fun race, really. I think we averaged almost 43 kilometers an hour. So yeah, it's definitely a fast one and not one for a light climber like myself. It's definitely more of a sprinter's event, but yeah, good fun. And it's always fun to be riding in a group that big going fast. But like, it's always funny actually, because when you're in the group, you barely even have to try. But as soon as you get out on your own off the front, trying to chase a move, it's like you're doing 450 watts or you're just spinning doing zone 2. I think if I'd have sat on the back the whole way, I'd have probably done less power than riding out zone 2 on the way out here. I'm learning how to race. There was a few sketchy pedal strikes that I made as well, but every race is a bit of a learning opportunity, so I can't really complain. And yeah, I probably was about sort of 20th. I think there's probably 40 plus riders in that today. It was a huge field. So yeah, definitely a respectable result given that I'm definitely not a sprinter. It's funny, I don't actually feel that tired, because yeah, you spend most of the time just coasting in the group, or yeah, absolutely busting your lungs trying to get off the front. But yeah, when you notice, like in a field like that, there was no way any move was sticking. You could just tell that no one was letting anything go. And I think the guy who won it was the guy who chased down my solo move racing here last year in a race where I ended up coming 3rd, back when I was racing 4th cat. So yeah, that's quite funny. Right, let's drop my number off and get on with the ride home.
So yeah, how did it go racing my cheap second-hand endurance bike in a crit? Well, I have to say it wasn't the perfect bike for the job. That endurance geometry just doesn't lean itself too much into like fast cornering, and definitely the reach was way too short for me. I was finding whenever I was trying to tuck down and get aero, I was just way too cramped, even after putting a longer 110mm stem on there. I think realistically I'd have probably needed a 130 or even a 140 to get my position right on this bike, and it's still really quite high up at the front. I probably could have dropped it a few more spaces really, but yeah, still wasn't ideal. However, can you race a crit on a cheap second-hand bike? Absolutely, of course. And the one thing you haven't heard me complain about was the rim brakes. Because honestly, you barely ever have to actually brake in a crit like this. If you're braking, you're probably doing something wrong. As you're coming into corners, you're generally just shaving off your speed by backing off the power earlier. You know, barely anyone's braking, more than just slightly skimming off a bit of speed. So yeah, you don't really need amazing brakes. Now, I'd race a crit like that on the cheapest bike you can get. Just make sure you've got your position dialed. And I think with a little bit more tweaking, I probably could have solved that problem. But if you enjoyed today's video, you'll have to let me know, because it's a little bit of a new one for the channel, going out and racing a crit. And get yourself subscribed down below if you're not already. And remember to check out channel membership if you're interested in supporting the channel even more. But I think that's all we got time for today, and I'll see you all in the next one.